The vibration of my phone was a dull throb against my thigh, a tiny earthquake in the calm I'd desperately been trying to cultivate. It was Nathan, of course. He was roughing it. He was one with nature. He was, according to the photo attached to the text, lounging at a goddamn beachfront bar in Punta Cana, his arm possessively draped around the shoulders of her. Caught 3 fish today, solitude is really helping clear my mind. My fingers trembled as I tapped out my response. That's wonderful, honey. I'm so glad you're finding peace in nature. My name is Lyra Thorne, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I had a marriage. A solid, dependable, real marriage. Now, I felt like I was standing on a fault line, the earth cracking open beneath my feet. It was Maya, my paralegal, who had triggered the quake. She'd practically sprinted into my office, her face flushed, her voice tight with a concern. I didn't want. Lyra, you need to see this. Now, Brianna Sterling, Nathan's secretary. Her Facebook page shimmered on Maya's laptop screen, a kaleidoscope of sunshine, smiles, and stolen moments. Sunset walks, candlelit dinners, a goddamn helicopter ride. Each photo time-stamped, each tagged with captions dripping in saccharine sentimentality. Finally, with my true love. 3, no more hiding. The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking stupidity. Oh, Lyra. I'm so sorry, Maya whispered, her hand hovering over mine. I closed the laptop with a deliberate slowness. Years of courtroom battles had honed my ability to mask my emotions, to present a cool, impenetrable facade. Nathan had no idea his perfectly planned camping trip was about to implode. He had no idea his mistress's insatiable need for validation on social media was about to be his downfall. First, I said, pulling a legal pad towards me, I'm going to text my darling husband and ask if the fish were biting. Shouldn't you confront him? Maya asked, confusion etched on her face. I smiled, a cold, predatory smile I usually reserved for opposing counsel. Oh, Maya, do you know what's better than catching him in a lie? Letting him keep lying while I dismantle his entire life. Nathan thought he was so clever. He thought he was so safe. He was about to learn a very, very painful lesson. Nathan and I had been inseparable since our first year at Georgetown Law. He was charismatic, ambitious, the kind of man who commanded attention without even trying. He'd swept me off my feet with grand gestures and whispered promises of a future where we'd conquer the world, together. While other couples crumbled under the pressure cooker of law school, we thrived. We pushed each other, challenged each other, celebrated each other's victories. After graduation, I turned down a partnership at a prestigious DC firm to follow Nathan to Denver. He'd landed a coveted position at Sterling and Price, and I refused to start our marriage with miles between us. You're making the right choice, Lyra, he'd said, his eyes shining with what I now realized was calculated gratitude. We're a team. I found my own success, carving out a reputation as a ruthless and brilliant litigator at Howell and Hayes. Nathan seemed proud, at first. But as my star rose higher, as my name started appearing in legal publications and on best lawyers' lists, I noticed a subtle shift. His smiles became tighter, his compliments less frequent. Our marriage wasn't perfect. There were late nights, missed dinners, the constant hum of stress that permeated our lives. But we always talked. We always compromised. Or at least, I thought we did. Brianna. The name tasted like poison on my tongue. She'd arrived at Sterling and Price 6 months ago, a fresh-faced blonde with a disarming smile and an unnervingly efficient work ethic. Nathan couldn't stop singing her praises. She's so organized, Lyra. Finally, a secretary who anticipates my needs. I'd dismissed the prickling of unease, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, I trusted my husband. I loved my husband. Maya's voice cut through my memories. Remember when he missed your anniversary dinner last month? Said he had to work late? I pulled up Brianna's Facebook page again, scrolling back through her timeline. There it was. A check-in at Cielo Grill, the very restaurant I'd made reservations at on the night of our anniversary. The caption read, "Late night at the office never felt so good." I can't believe I was so blind, I muttered, the words laced with self-loathing. Maya shook her head. You weren't blind, Lyra. You were trusting. There's a difference. I thought of all the other signs I'd ignored. The new gym membership he never used. The sudden interest in work conferences in far-flung locations. The changed passwords on his phone and laptop. Textbook signs of infidelity. The kind I'd dissected countless times in divorce cases. Yet, I'd stubbornly clung to the belief that we were different. That our love was stronger. You know what the worst part is? I said, pulling up our joint account records. He's using our money to finance their little romance. Maya gasped as I pointed out the extravagant transactions. First-class tickets to Punta Cana, a 5-star resort. Designer jewelry I'd never seen. And look at this, Maya said, her voice trembling. She'd been digging deeper into the financial rabbit hole, uncovering secrets I never imagined. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the numbers on the screen. Nathan hadn't just been spending our joint money. He'd been systematically transferring substantial sums into a private account, an account I knew nothing about. $150,000, I whispered, the sum echoing the hollowness in my chest. He's been hiding money. That's more than just affair money, Lyra, Maya said carefully. That looks like exit strategy money. He'd been planning to leave me, not just for Brianna, but for a life meticulously constructed on lies and deceit. A life built with my money, my sacrifices, my unwavering loyalty. I stood up, the anger surging through me, a potent cocktail of rage and betrayal. Maya, the first need a favor. Can you cover my meetings for the rest of the week? Of course, she said, her eyes filled with concern. What are you going to do? I picked up my phone, composing another saccharine text to my cheating husband. I'm going to make him wish he'd never learned how to lie. The next morning, I was at Denver Fidelity Bank before they even opened. Mrs. Henderson, the branch manager, practically curtsied as she ushered me into her office. I'd handled several corporate accounts for the bank over the years, and my name carried weight. Miss Thorne, what a pleasure. What brings you in so early? I didn't waste any time on pleasantries. I need to discuss some suspicious activity on my joint accounts. I believe my husband has been moving money without my knowledge or consent. I slid copies of the financial records across her mahogany desk. Within an hour, I had frozen our joint accounts and transferred my personal assets to a new, secure account. Nathan wouldn't realize this until he tried to access the funds, likely when it was time to pay for their romantic getaway. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. Back at my office, I moved on to phase 2. I called Dana Caldwell, the HR director at Sterling and Price. Dana and I went way back, from being opposing counsel to the same charity board. She would be discreet and take my claim serious. Dana, I need to discuss a sensitive matter, I began, my voice carefully neutral. It's regarding Nathan and his secretary, Brianna Sterling. Dana's tone hardened. What about them? I forwarded her a carefully curated selection of Brianna's social media posts. I believe this violates your firm's policies on supervisor-subordinate relationships. The silence on the other end was deafening. I'll need to escalate this immediately, Lyra. This is extremely concerning. I understand, I replied, keeping my voice professional. I just thought you should be aware. Next, I called our locksmith. Being the one who handled all the household maintenance had its advantages. Nathan never paid attention to these details. Yes, I need an urgent replacement of all the locks on my house. Today, if possible. While I waited for the locksmith, I started dismantling Nathan's life. Each designer suit, each expensive tie, each monogrammed shirt, all went into heavy-duty garbage bags. 8 years of marriage reduced to black plastic sacks piled on our pristine driveway. My phone buzzed. Another text from Nathan. Missing you? Can't wait to tell you all about my adventures. I smiled, a predatory glint in my eyes. I typed back, missing you too. Hey, quick question. Did you remember to pay the credit card bill before you left? His response was immediate. Of course, honey. Don't worry about anything. Another lie. I was staring at the overdue notice right now. He'd been too busy planning his illicit vacation to handle basic responsibilities. Maya called around noon, her voice frantic. Lyra, you need to see this. Brianna just posted again. I pulled up Facebook. There was Nathan, raising a champagne glass on a sunset cruise. The caption read, "Living my best life with my soulmate. 3, no more hiding." No more hiding indeed, I murmured, forwarding the photo to Dana at HR. The locksmith arrived just as I received an email from my divorce attorney, confirming she'd filed the paperwork. Everything was falling into place. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, exhilarating sense of control. Then, my phone rang. An unknown number. Something made me answer. Is this Lyra Thorne? A woman's voice asked, unfamiliar and nervous. Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah. I was Brianna's roommate until last month. There's something you need to know. My heart leaped into my throat. I'm listening. This isn't the first time they've done this, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Brianna, she and Nathan, they've pulled this scheme before, at his last firm. I sank into my office chair, the air suddenly thick and hard to breathe. What scheme? They target wealthy executives, get compromising photos, then threaten to expose everything unless they're paid off. But this time was different. Brianna, she actually fell for Nathan. She broke their pattern, started posting everything online. He's furious. The room spun. I thought of the money Nathan had been moving, the client funds he'd been embezzling. This wasn't just an affair. It was an elaborate con that had spiraled out of control. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because Brianna called me crying last night. Nathan's threatening to pin everything on her. She's terrified. I hung up and immediately called William Price, Nathan's boss and the firm's managing partner. We needed to talk this out, and I knew I had to convince him. William, we need to talk, I said. This goes deeper than you think. Within an hour, I was sitting in his office, laying out everything Sarah had told me. William looked physically ill. He hadn't eaten any of the pastries his secretary placed on the table. 3 other firms, he said, scanning the evidence I'd gathered. 3 other executives blackmailed. How did we miss this? Because they were careful, I replied. Until Brianna went off script. My phone buzzed. Nathan again. Having dinner by the campfire. Wish you were here. I stared at his message, seeing it for what it really was. Not just a lie, but a calculated manipulation. All those business trips, those late nights at the office. How many other cons had he run that I didn't know about? William leaned forward. Lyra, we need to handle this carefully. If what you're saying is true, this is now a federal case. Wire fraud, blackmail, embezzlement. I know exactly how we need to handle it, I said, pulling out my phone. I typed a message to Nathan, darling. There's been a problem with one of our accounts. Can you check your email? Then, I sent him a carefully crafted email, one containing screenshots of his previous schemes, Brianna's social media posts, and Sarah's statement. I added one line. Guess your camping trip just got interrupted. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications. Nathan, finally dropping his camping pretense, called 6 times in rapid succession. Brianna posted a long, tearful video confession on Facebook before deleting her entire account. The house of cards was collapsing. William had already contacted the FBI. They want to meet tomorrow morning, he said, his voice trembling. This could be huge. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. I'll be there. That evening, as I sat in my newly secured home, I received one final text from Nathan. You don't understand what you've done. I can explain everything. I smiled, thinking of all the evidence, safely documented and distributed to multiple authorities. Actually, I typed back, I understand perfectly. And unlike your camping photos, I have real receipts. Then I blocked his number and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow would be intense, but tonight, I could savor the fact that Nathan's perfectly constructed house of lies was burning to the ground. The FBI meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. By 8:30, the lobby of Sterling and Price was in chaos. News of the investigation had spread like wildfire, and reporters were swarming the building. I felt for the receptionists who were doing their best to hold back the media storm. Nathan and Brianna had apparently tried to flee Punta Cana separately, only to be detained at the airport by Dominican authorities. William Price looked like he hadn't slept in days. 6 clients, he said, rubbing his temples. They blackmailed 6 of our top clients. The total amount is over $5 million. At least, I finished. The forensic accountants had worked through the night, and that's just what they'd found so far. Agent Mallory, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s, spread crime scene photos across the conference table. Nathan and Brianna with different executives, all following the same pattern. The evidence was overwhelming. "Mrs. Thorne," she said, her gaze intense, "your husband and Miss Sterling will be extradited within 48 hours. But we're more interested in the money trail. Those offshore accounts you found?" My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Nathan, using a hotel phone. "Baby, please. You're ruining everything. We can work this out." I showed the message to Agent Mallory, who nodded. "Keep him talking. Work what out?" I texted back. "The affair or the felonies?" "You don't understand," he replied immediately. "I did this for us. The money was for our future." I almost laughed. "Our future? While you were planning to leave me? Who told you that?" he demanded. "Brianna? She's lying. She means nothing." Agent Mallory was recording every message. "Press harder," she instructed. "Really?" I wrote. "So you didn't help her set up that account in the Caymans? The one you've been funneling client money into?" The typing bubbles appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, he snapped. "How did you find out?" "I'm a corporate attorney, Nathan. Following money trails is literally my job. By the way, the FBI says hello." His response was immediate and desperate. "I'll tell you where all the money is. Just don't let them arrest me." Agent Mallory smiled. "Got him." Within hours, Nathan and Brianna were in custody, their scheme exposed. It had been bigger than anyone imagined, spanning multiple states, firms, and victims. William Price called an emergency board meeting. "The firm's reputation," he began, his voice filled with despair. "We will survive," I interrupted. "Because you caught it, reported it, and are making all the victims whole. That's the story we're telling." He looked at me gratefully. "Lyra, if you want to join us as a partner, let me think about it," I said, though I already knew my answer. I had bigger plans. Later that evening, as I sat in my newly secured home, Maya brought over takeout and wine. "So," she said, "I heard Nathan's trying to plea bargain." I nodded, offering her a glass of Pinot Noir, offering to testify against everyone involved in their previous schemes. Apparently, there were more victims than even I found. "How are you holding up?" I looked around my living room, at the art I'd collected, the books I loved, the life I'd built, piece by piece, over the years. "You know what's funny?" I said. "He always treated my career like it was a hobby, something I did to pass the time until we had kids. He never realized that all those skills, all that experience, it was exactly what I needed to bring him down." Maya raised her glass. "To karma?" "No," I corrected her, thinking of all the evidence I'd meticulously gathered, all the legal strings I'd pulled, all the dominoes I'd carefully set up before knocking them down. "To justice, the kind you make happen yourself." The trial was mercifully brief. Nathan and Brianna both took plea deals. He got 8 years. She got 5. The feds were going after Brianna for her involvement in the blackmail schemes, in addition to Nathan. The evidence I'd gathered was so comprehensive that their lawyers advised against fighting the charges. In the end, the man who'd spent years manipulating others couldn't talk his way out of this one. I sat in the courtroom during sentencing, wearing the same deep blue suit I'd worn during our first law school mock trial. Nathan couldn't stop staring at me, his face a mask of disbelief and desperation. He'd finally realized that while he was playing checkers, I'd been playing chess. "Your Honor," he tried one last time, his voice cracking. "My wife and I could work this out privately." Judge Mallory cut him off. "Mr. Thorne, your wife isn't pressing charges. The federal government is. And we have overwhelming evidence of wire fraud, blackmail, and embezzlement. I didn't stay to watch him being led away. Instead, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Denver morning, feeling lighter than I had in years. The divorce finalization would be a formality, but this, the trial, this was what mattered to me. Sterling and Price had already offered me a partnership with a corner office and a team of my own, but more importantly, I'd started a side project, a consulting firm helping companies identify and prevent internal fraud. Turns out, there was a huge market for someone who'd uncovered one of the biggest corporate blackmail schemes in Colorado history. Nathan's last letter arrived a week later. I dropped it in the shredder unopened. Some chapters don't need a final page, they just need to end. The media coverage eventually died down, and my life settled into a new rhythm. My fraud consulting firm took off faster than I'd expected, with clients across 3 states seeking my expertise. Sometimes I wondered if Nathan saw the articles about my success from his prison cell. He didn't have access to the internet, but he did have access to a couple newspapers in the library. One morning, 6 months after the sentencing, Brianna's former roommate, Sarah, came to my office. "I heard you help companies protect themselves against fraud now," she said hesitantly. "I'm starting a small business, and I thought, well, after everything that happened." I studied her for a moment, remembering how her phone call had been the key to unraveling Nathan's entire scheme. "I'm glad she came clean and helped me with everything. First consultation is free," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Later that evening, as I worked late in my corner office at Sterling and Price, William Price stopped by. "Just signed another client," he said. "They specifically requested you handle their case. Said they heard how you handled the Thorne scandal." I smiled at the irony. Nathan's attempt to destroy me had, in the end, become my biggest selling point. "You know," William added, "he tried to write to me from prison. Wanted me to convince you to answer his letters. I kept typing, not looking up, and I told him you were too busy running 2 successful businesses to read prison mail." I finally looked up, catching my reflection in the office window. The woman staring back wasn't a victim or a betrayed wife. She was a survivor, someone who'd turned betrayal into triumph. "Perfect answer," I said and went back to work. The next few years blurred into a whirlwind of depositions, board meetings, and cross-country flights. Thorne Consulting became synonymous with integrity and ruthless efficiency. We specialized in uncovering fraud, yes, but more importantly, in building systems that prevented it in the first place. I hired a team of sharp, dedicated investigators, many of whom had been burned by corporate malfeasance themselves. We were a force to be reckoned with, a pack of wolves sniffing out corruption wherever it hid. My personal life, however, remained deliberately quiet. Dating felt like a chore, a minefield of awkward small talk and potential red flags. I'd learned the hard way the dangers of trusting too easily. So I channeled my energy into my work, into building something that was entirely mine. My social circle narrowed to Maya, who was now a partner at Howell and Hayes, and a few close friends from law school. We'd gather for the occasional dinner or weekend getaway, a haven of laughter and shared experiences in a world that often felt cynical and cutthroat. One evening, Maya called, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Lyra, you are not going to believe who just reached out to me." "Hit me," I said, stirring my pasta. "Remember Jake Ramsey from Georgetown? The one with the ridiculously chiseled jawline and the even more ridiculously high LSAT score? Jake Ramsey." The name sent a faint flicker of recognition through my memory. He'd been a year ahead of us at law school, a golden boy destined for greatness. He was also, if I recalled correctly, devastatingly handsome and relentlessly charming. "Vaguely," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "What about him?" "He's back in Denver. Just took a position as senior partner at Montgomery and Yates. Apparently, they're looking to expand their white-collar crime division, and he specifically asked for you to consult." I paused, the fork halfway to my mouth. "Me? Why?" "He said he's been following your work. He's impressed with Thorne Consulting. He wants the best, Lyra." Maya's voice dripped with suggestive enthusiasm. "And maybe," she added with a playful giggle, "he wants to see if the rumors about your post-divorce glow-up are true." I rolled my eyes, but a small, traitorous part of me felt a flutter of something. It wasn't exactly excitement, more like a cautious curiosity. "Tell him I'm booked solid for the next 6 months," I said, trying to sound decisive. "Lyra," Maya protested, "don't be ridiculous. This is a huge opportunity. And, let's be honest, you haven't had a decent date since, well, since forever." I sighed. She had a point. "Fine. Set up a meeting. But strictly business, understand?" The meeting with Jake Ramsey was scheduled for the following week. I spent the days leading up to it alternating between meticulous preparation and a low-grade sense of anxiety. I reviewed Montgomery and Yates' client list, researched Jake's career trajectory, and mentally rehearsed my consulting fees. I also, I'll admit, spent an embarrassing amount of time staring at myself in the mirror, scrutinizing my appearance for any signs of wear and tear. By the time the day arrived, I was a bundle of nerves wrapped in a power suit. I arrived at Montgomery and Yates precisely on time, my briefcase clutched tightly in my hand. Jake Ramsey was waiting for me in the reception area. He was even more striking than I remembered. His jawline was indeed chiseled, his eyes were a piercing shade of blue, and his smile, well, his smile could probably melt glaciers. "Lyra," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, confident. "It's great to finally meet you in person." "Jake," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The pleasure is all mine." He led me to his office, a corner suite overlooking downtown Denver. It was impeccably decorated, tasteful without being ostentatious. A framed diploma from Georgetown Law hung prominently on the wall. We spent the next hour discussing business. Jake was sharp, articulate, and clearly passionate about his work. He explained Montgomery and Yates's goals for expanding their white-collar crime division and outlined the specific challenges they faced. I listened intently, offering my insights and suggesting potential solutions. I could tell he was impressed. He peppered me with questions about my consulting methods, my success rate, and my team's expertise. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake leaned back in his chair, his eyes twinkling. "So, Lyra," he said, "are you willing to take on the challenge?" I paused, pretending to consider the offer. "I think Thorne Consulting can definitely help Montgomery and Yates achieve its goals," I said finally. "But first, I have a question for you." "Shoot." "Why me, Jake? You could have hired any number of consultants in this city. Why specifically Thorne Consulting?" He hesitated for a moment, his gaze intense. "Because," he said softly, "I've been watching you, Lyra. I've been watching you rebuild your life, build your business, and become one of the most respected figures in the legal community. I admire your resilience, your intelligence, and your unwavering commitment to justice." He paused, his eyes locking with mine. "And," he added with a wry smile, "I also happen to think you're incredibly beautiful." My carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't expected him to see me, the woman behind the power suits and the steely gaze, I cleared my throat, trying to regain control of the situation. Well, Jake, I said, forcing a smile, flattery will get you everywhere. Let's talk contract terms. Working with Jake and Montgomery and Yates was both challenging and exhilarating. The cases were complex, the stakes were high, and the hours were brutal. But I thrived under pressure. I loved the intellectual stimulation, the strategic maneuvering, the satisfaction of uncovering the truth. And I'll admit, I enjoyed spending time with Jake. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in my opinions. We'd often grab lunch together or work late into the night, bouncing ideas off each other and debating legal strategies. It wasn't long before our relationship transcended professional boundaries. A lingering touch, a stolen glance, a shared laugh. The signs were subtle but undeniable. We were both drawn to each other, a magnetic pull that grew stronger with each passing day. I tried to resist it, of course. I was still wary of getting hurt again, of opening myself up to someone new. But Jake was persistent, and his charm was, well, irresistible. One evening, after a particularly grueling deposition, Jake invited me to his apartment for dinner, just to unwind, he said with a disarming smile. No shop talk allowed. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. I knew it was a bad idea, a slippery slope that could lead to heartbreak, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to spend time with him, to see what lay beneath the surface of his carefully cultivated facade. His apartment was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. He'd prepared a simple but elegant meal, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of chilled white wine. We ate in comfortable silence, the only sound the soft hum of the city below. As the evening wore on, the conversation deepened. We talked about our families, our dreams, our fears. I told him about Nathan, about the betrayal, about the years it had taken me to rebuild my life. He listened intently, his eyes filled with empathy. When I was finished, he reached across the table and took my hand. Lyra, he said softly, I know what you've been through, and I know it's hard for you to trust, but I want you to know that I would never hurt you. I would never lie to you. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. All I saw was sincerity, a genuine desire to connect. I took a deep breath, letting go of my fear, my doubt, my carefully constructed walls. I want to trust you, Jake, I said. I really do. He smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. Then trust me, he whispered, leaning closer. Our lips met, a tentative first kiss that quickly deepened into something more passionate, more urgent. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us, lost in the moment. We spent the night together, wrapped in each other's arms. It was the first time in years I'd felt truly safe, truly loved. But the next morning, as I lay in Jake's arms, a chilling realization dawned on me. Something wasn't adding up. A detail I'd overlooked, a comment he'd made, a nagging sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Jake, I said, my voice trembling, there's something you need to tell me. He stirred beside me, his brow furrowed. What is it, Lyra? It's about Nathan, I said, the name like a shard of glass in my throat. It's about the blackmail scheme. You knew about it, didn't you? His eyes widened, his face paling. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, Jake, I said, my voice rising. I know you knew. You knew about Nathan and Brianna, about the other victims. You were involved, weren't you? He didn't answer. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. The blood drained from my face. I stumbled out of bed, grabbing my clothes and pulling them on with shaking hands. Lyra, please, Jake said, his voice pleading. Let me explain. Explain what? I screamed, my voice breaking. Explain how you used me? Explain how you pretended to care about me while you were protecting a criminal? Explain how you betrayed me. Again? I stormed out of his apartment, my heart shattered, my world crumbling around me. I had been a fool, a naive, trusting fool. I had let my guard down and I had paid the price. As I drove home, tears streaming down my face, I made a vow to myself. I would not be a victim. I would not let Jake Ramsey destroy me. I would find out the truth, and I would make him pay for his betrayal. This time, it was personal. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic investigation and sleepless nights. I channeled all my rage and hurt into uncovering Jake's involvement in the blackmail scheme. I pored over financial records, interviewed former colleagues, and scoured court documents, searching for any link between Jake and Nathan. I confided in Maya, who was both furious and devastated by Jake's betrayal. She offered her full support, promising to use her resources at Howell and Hayes to help me find the truth. "He's a master manipulator, Lyra," Maya said, her voice grim. "He's good at covering his tracks, but we'll find something." We always do. The deeper I dug, the more suspicious Jake's behavior became. He'd been unusually generous to Nathan in the years leading up to the blackmail scheme, offering him lucrative consulting gigs and recommending him for high-profile cases. He'd also been in frequent contact with Brianna, ostensibly to discuss administrative matters, but their conversations often stretched on for hours, far longer than necessary. Then I found it. A small, almost insignificant detail, buried in a complex financial transaction. A transfer of funds from a shell corporation linked to Jake to an offshore account controlled by Nathan. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to raise serious questions. I took the information to Agent Mallory, the FBI agent who had led the investigation into Nathan's blackmail scheme. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. "We've suspected Ramsey's involvement for some time," she said finally, "but we haven't been able to find any concrete evidence." "This could be it, Lyra." She promised to open a formal investigation into Jake, but cautioned me against taking matters into my own hands. "Let us handle this, Mrs. Thorne," she said. "This is a dangerous situation. You could put yourself at risk." But I couldn't wait. I needed answers. I needed to confront Jake, to make him confess to his crimes. I arranged a meeting with him at his office. I didn't tell him what I knew, just said I wanted to talk about our relationship. He seemed relieved to see me. "Lyra," he said, his voice soft, "I've been so worried about you. I want to explain everything." "There's nothing to explain, Jake," I said, my voice cold. "I know the truth. I know about your involvement in the blackmail scheme. I know you were protecting Nathan." His face fell. "How did you find out? It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that you betrayed me. You used me. You lied to me. And now you're going to pay." I pulled out the financial records, the phone logs, the evidence I'd gathered over the past few weeks. I laid it all out on his desk, a damning indictment of his guilt. He stared at the evidence, his face contorted with fear and desperation. "Okay, fine," he said finally. "You're right. I was involved. But it's not what you think." He proceeded to tell me a story about how Nathan had blackmailed him into helping, threatening to expose a secret from his past. He claimed he'd been acting under duress, forced to protect himself and his family. I didn't believe him. I saw the lies in his eyes, the calculated manipulation in his voice. "You're a liar, Jake," I said. "You're just trying to save your own skin." I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my arm. "Lyra, please," he begged. "Don't do this. I love you. I can make this right." I wrenched my arm away, my eyes filled with disgust. "I never want to see you again," I said. As I walked out of his office, I knew that I'd made the right decision. I had exposed his lies, and I had set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately bring him to justice. But I also knew that I was far from safe. Jake Ramsey was a dangerous man, and he wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to protect himself. I had become a threat to him, and he would stop at nothing to silence me. I had become the hunted, and the hunter was closing in. I went into hiding, staying with Maya and taking extra precautions to protect myself. I changed my phone number, deactivated my social media accounts, and hired a private security firm to monitor my movements. Agent Mallory assured me that the FBI was closing in on Jake, but she urged me to remain vigilant. "He's desperate, Mrs. Thorne," she said. "He could do anything." I knew she was right. I could feel Jake's presence looming over me, a dark shadow lurking just out of sight. One night, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering it, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling. "Lyra," a familiar voice said on the other end. "We need to talk." It was Jake. "Stay away from me, Jake," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I've told the FBI everything. You're going to prison. I can explain everything, Lyra," he said, his voice pleading. "Just give me one chance. There's nothing to explain," I said. "It's over." "No, it's not over," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm not going to let you ruin my life." "You ruined your own life, Jake," I said. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice menacing. "I'm coming for you, Lyra. And this time there's no one who can protect you." He hung up. I called Agent Mallory, my hands shaking. "He's threatened me, Agent Mallory," I said. "He knows where I am. You have to arrest him now." She assured me that they were doing everything they could, but they needed more evidence to make an arrest. "Just stay safe, Mrs. Thorne," she said. "We're almost there," but I knew I couldn't wait. I had to take matters into my own hands. I had to confront Jake, to end this once and for all. I knew where he would be. At his family's remote cabin in the mountains, a place where he often went to escape the pressures of his life. It was isolated, secluded, the perfect place for him to hide. I packed a bag, grabbed my gun, a Smith & Wesson I'd learned to use at the shooting range, and drove up into the mountains. I knew it was a risky move, but I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I had to face Jake, to make him pay for his crimes. As I approached the cabin, I could see a light on inside. I parked my car a safe distance away and approached on foot, my gun drawn, my senses on high alert. I kicked down the door and stormed inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Jake was standing by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned to face me, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and anger. "Lyra," he said, his voice calm. "I knew you'd come. It's over, Jake," I said, my gun pointed at his chest. "The FBI is coming. You're going to prison." He laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. "You think you've won, Lyra?" he said. "You think you can just walk in here and arrest me?" "I don't want to arrest you, Jake," I said. "I want to know why." "Why did you do it? Why did you betray me?" He hesitated for a moment, his gaze intense. "I did it for the money, Lyra," he said finally. "I was in debt, and Nathan offered me a way out." "I didn't think anyone would get hurt. You're lying," I said. "It was more than that. You enjoyed it, didn't you? You enjoyed manipulating people, controlling them, watching their lives fall apart." He didn't answer. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. "I'm done, Jake," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I'm done with the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation. It ends here." I pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing through the cabin. Jake stumbled backward, clutching his chest. He fell to the floor, his eyes staring up at the ceiling. I stood there, frozen in place, my gun still pointed at his body. I had killed him. I had taken a life. But I felt no remorse. Only relief. It was over. It was finally over. The FBI arrived a few hours later. I surrendered to them willingly, confessing to everything. I was arrested and charged with murder. But at trial, I argued self-defense. I presented the evidence of Jake's crimes, his involvement in the blackmail scheme, his threats against my life. The jury deliberated for days. In the end, they found me not guilty. I was free. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright mountain air, feeling lighter than I had in years. I had faced my demons, and I had emerged victorious. I had lost everything, my marriage, my trust, my faith in humanity. But I had also gained something invaluable, my freedom. I was finally free to build a new life, a life free from lies, betrayal, and manipulation. a life of my own making. The road ahead would not be easy, but I was ready for it. I was stronger than I had ever been, and I knew that I would survive. I would thrive. I was Lyra Thorne, and I was unstoppable. The aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind of media attention, public scrutiny, and a deep, pervasive exhaustion. I retreated from the spotlight, seeking solace in the quiet solitude of my mountain cabin, the same one where Jake had met his end, ironically. I needed time to heal, to process the trauma, and to figure out what came next. Thorne Consulting, surprisingly, thrived. The notoriety from the trial, while initially overwhelming, ultimately boosted our reputation. Clients were drawn to my resilience, my unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, and my hard-earned understanding of the darkest corners of corporate corruption. Maya, ever the loyal friend, stepped in to manage the day-to-day operations, allowing me the space to focus on my own healing. I poured myself into pro bono work, helping victims of fraud and abuse navigate the legal system. It was a way of giving back, of using my experiences to make a positive impact on the world. Slowly, gradually, the nightmares faded, the anxiety lessened, and the wounds began to heal. I rediscovered my love for hiking, spending hours exploring the trails surrounding my cabin, breathing in the crisp mountain air, and marveling at the beauty of nature. I learned to forgive myself for my mistakes, to accept the past, and to embrace the future with cautious optimism. One crisp autumn afternoon, a few years after the trial, I received an unexpected visitor. Agent Mallory, now retired from the FBI, drove up to my cabin, a small smile playing on her lips. "Miss S. Thorne," she said, extending her hand. "It's good to see you, Agent Mallory," I replied, returning her smile. "What brings you all the way up here?" "I just wanted to check in, see how you were doing," she said. And to deliver something, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn leather-bound journal. "We found this in Jake Ramsey's cabin after the shooting," she said. "It's his private journal. We thought you should have it." I took the journal, my fingers trembling slightly. It felt heavy in my hands, laden with the weight of Jake's secrets, his lies, his twisted motivations. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I don't know if I want to read it." "I think you should," Agent Mallory said. "It might give you some closure." She stayed for a cup of tea. We talked about the case, about Jake, about the aftermath. Before she left, she said, "You know, Lyra, what you did wasn't right. But I understand. I see what that bastard put you through." Agent Mallory departed, leaving me alone with Jake's journal. I sat on the porch swing, the setting sun painting the mountains in hues of orange and gold, and opened the book. The entries were rambling, disjointed, a disturbing glimpse into the mind of a sociopath. He wrote about his childhood, his ambition, his insatiable need for control. He described how he had manipulated people, exploited their weaknesses, and relished their suffering. As I read, a chilling picture emerged. Jake had been involved in far more than just Nathan's blackmail scheme. He had been a master puppeteer, orchestrating a web of corruption that spanned decades and touched countless lives. He had seen me as a challenge, a puzzle to be solved, a prize to be won. He had underestimated my strength, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment to justice. The final entry was dated the day before I confronted him at the cabin. It was short, chillingly simple. "Lyra knows too much. She must be silenced." I closed the journal, my heart pounding. It was a confirmation of everything I had suspected, a validation of my actions. But it was also a reminder of the darkness that existed in the world, the evil that could lurk beneath the most charming of facades. I carried the journal to the fireplace, dropped it into the flames, and watched as it burned to ashes. It was a symbolic act, a final cleansing, a complete and utter rejection of Jake's influence over my life. As the last embers faded, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had faced my demons, and I had conquered them. I was finally free. A few months later, I received another unexpected visitor. This time, it was William Price, my former boss, and a close confidant. "Lyra," he said, his voice grave. "I have something to ask you." He explained that Sterling and Price was facing a crisis. A new partner had been accused of financial misconduct, and the firm's reputation was once again at stake. "We need your help, Lyra," William said. "We need someone we can trust to come in and clean things up." I hesitated for a moment, considering the offer. Returning to Sterling and Price would mean facing the ghosts of my past, confronting the painful memories of my marriage to Nathan. But I also knew that it was an opportunity to make a real difference, to help a firm I once respected regain its integrity. "I'll do it, William," the first said finally, "but on my terms." I returned to Sterling and Price as a consultant, bringing my team from Thorne Consulting with me. We conducted a thorough internal investigation, uncovering the extent of the misconduct and implementing safeguards to prevent it from happening again. It was a difficult and demanding process, but it was also incredibly rewarding. I helped Sterling and Price rebuild its reputation, restore its clients' trust, and create a culture of transparency and accountability. As I walked through the familiar halls, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I had come full circle, returning to the place where my life had once been shattered and transforming it into a symbol of my strength, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment to justice. One afternoon, as I was packing up my office, William stopped by. "Lyra," he said, his voice sincere, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved this firm." "I was just doing what was right, William," the first said. "There's something else I wanted to say," he continued. "I know what happened with Jake Ramsey was difficult, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. If you ever need anything at all." I smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Thank you, William," the first said. "I appreciate that." He paused, then reached out and took my hand. "You know, Lyra," he said softly, "you're an incredible woman. Strong, intelligent, compassionate. You deserve to be happy." I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I saw something more than friendship. I saw a genuine affection, a deep admiration, a quiet longing. I smiled again, a slow, knowing smile. "Maybe someday," I said, "but right now I'm happy just being me." I left Sterling and Price that evening, feeling a sense of contentment I hadn't known was possible. I had healed, I had grown, and I had found my purpose. I was finally free. As I drove home, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, I thought about the future. I didn't know what it held, but I was no longer afraid. I was Lyra Thorne, and I was ready for anything. I pulled into my driveway, stepped out of my car, and looked up at the stars. They twinkled in the night sky, a reminder of the vastness of the universe, the endless possibilities that lay ahead. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp mountain air, and smiled. It was a new dawn, and I was finally ready to embrace it.